Good evening or morning, wherever you are. My name is Orville Gibson, and I'm listening to Craig Wessels on A Yank on the Footy, and you should listen too.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 96 of A Yank on the Footy. I'm Craig Wessels from Sandusky, Ohio, and I'm thrilled that you're listening. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. This is the second half of my discussion with Orville Gibson, who I consider to be not only my friend, but an Australian hero. And we get into so many different avenues during this discussion, but it does always come back to footy. So I think you're really going to like that. Remember, you can find out everything about the podcast, check out all of the episodes, and anything related to the podcast at my website, yankonthefooty.com. I hope you'll consider checking it out. You can leave me a voicemail there that I love to include those in future episodes, especially the live episodes that I'm doing. You can share your views on a previous round or on an issue that you think I should address or a question you may have. You can leave a review there. You can get signed up for the mailing list as well. So when a new episode comes out, I'll get it to you as soon as it is released. Also, if you'd like to consider helping out the show, you can check out the Buy Me a Coffee page, which is up on the website. Any of that comes in from that goes right back into the podcast. I truly appreciate that. You can check out the Redbubble storefront there as well. I've got a couple different patterns that are up there with a couple more that are going to be released here very, very soon. And again, as I'd mentioned, I hope you'll consider signing up for the mailing list. That way I can get the new episodes out to you instantaneously, basically. As soon as they come out, that's the first place that I post them. So I do hope you'll consider checking that out. Now, today's club of the episode is the Morwell Mighty Tigers Football Club. They're part of the football and netball organization there. The Tigers were formed back in 1883 and are from Morwell, of course, which is about 150 kilometers east of Melbourne. They play at the Morwell Recreation Reserve. And their senior boys this weekend defeated Traralgon 67-52, and Isaac Abbas was named best on ground. Looked like he had a fantastic game. The reserves, third and fourth, dropped their contests. But I do wish the Mighty Tigers the absolute best in both football and netball as they go forward in the remainder of their fixtures. You can find out more about the Tigers at www.morwellfnc.com.au or on their Instagram page. I'll post links to both of those on the show notes. You can check those out. And ladies and gentlemen, I ask that you sit back and relax, unless you're driving, and enjoy part two of this fascinating discussion with Orville Gibson. Just a really, really wonderful gentleman, and I think you're going to like where this discussion goes, because there were things that we hadn't discussed prior to sitting down for this conversation that I was amazed by. Things that left me, quite frankly, stunned. And I think you're going to be stunned as well, because there are things that we're going to talk about today that, quite frankly, and I say this in all sincerity and in all seriousness, things about his family that could have changed the direction of the 20th century, could have changed the history of this planet. I kid you not about that. And hopefully that has piqued your interest a little bit enough, and that you're going to want to delve into this a little bit more deeply. And again, I do hope that you'll consider sharing it with your friends and family as well. I am absolutely delighted to be joined again by today's guest. If you listen to the first half of this interview, you're in for a treat. We're going to dive right back in with a number of other great stories with my friend Orville Gibson. And Orville is quite the historian, as we kind of alluded to and dug into a little bit in the last episode. And I'm really excited to have him back on here for this other half of our discussion. And we've just spent the last hour and 15 minutes talking about all sorts of different things that didn't make it into this episode. And I wish I had started recording in just didn't tell him about it because we had a lot of interesting things that we dug into here. So I'm glad to have Orville back with me tonight. So Orville, welcome back to the show. I appreciate you taking time out of your morning and coming back on.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Craig. I'm glad to be here again.
It's great.
Well, as you say, we covered an awful lot of ground before before we got the recording.
Oil exploration, petrographs, right? Petroglyphs. Yep. Indigenous musicians, guitar repair, oil exploration. we got east. We got into Timor. We got into raft building. We covered a lot of things before we recorded a second of this discussion tonight here. So as we're jumping back into this discussion here, if you listen to the first episode, if you haven't listened to the first episode, I strongly encourage you to stop right here, come back to this one, of course, but go back and listen to the first one before you listen to this one. As I got to school this morning, and I'm turning my computer on and I'm seeing some notifications show up on my phone. And if you heard the story last week that Orville, the last episode where Orville was talking about his time in the military, where he had rescued some people from a rooftop during a flood, he shared with me about a dozen pictures with his son. Now, none of the pictures with him in it, of course, but with his son in the picture, showing that area where that house was, where he rescued those individuals back, I think in 1973, if I'm not mistaken, and what it looks 74. Like 74 today in 2021. And you can almost visualize where things were when you go back and listen to that. And I don't know if I can figure out a way to share those pictures up on my, if it's okay with you to do that on my, my show notes for the podcast. If I could figure out how to do that, I would love to go ahead and show those. I may copy them into a Google Doc and then put the link up there so you can see what, so people can see what this looked like. So it was great to see what those look like. And then of course I get another message a little bit later on this evening before we're getting started that I've been told by a reliable source that a jar of Vegemite is on its way to my house. And I've been told that I have to do a live presentation, if you will, of me trying it for the first time, because I've not had it before. I've not had Vegemite before. I'm a little bit of a cautious eater. I'm not, there's some things that a lot of Americans find typical that I just don't care for. I'm not a fan of mayonnaise, salad dressing. I don't care for salad dressing. I eat my salads with a little bit of shredded cheese and some croutons on there, but I don't put dressing on my salads at all. So I'm weird when it comes to that. But then, I'll eat snails, and I ate monkey when I was in the Philippines, when I was in the Navy. So I'm willing definitely to try Vegemite. I have no idea if I will like it. I do like salty things, but we shall see how it goes. Okay. But I will record it, whether I broadcast it live. I don't know if I'll do that because, I might want to have plausible deniability and say, boy, I really loved it, but I did a little bit of editing and maybe I didn't. So we're going to give it a shot. Okay.
That's the spirit.
We're going to give it a shot. So on toast, or would crackers work?
Toast is better.
Okay. I've heard butter and Vegemite together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You put your butter on and then your Vegemite on the top.
Okay. And just a small amount to start out with, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Start small.
It's probably advisable that I can still see the bread.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You just put a thin scraping on.
So I'm.
If you come to like it, you'll be slathering it on. You won't be able to see your toast.
Okay. So I don't want to start out as though I'm working as an apprentice bricklayer, and I'm putting the mortar down to build a wall here.
No, you don't start out that way.
Okay, I'll take it slow then. So we've got a lot of topics to get into today, and some of them are footy related, some of them are just more related to Orville's background, and I just this is somebody who is a very well-rounded footy fan, and he's got all kinds of different interests. One of the things I want, and we really haven't talked about this yet, and I was going to mention this to him. We did talk a little bit about Hawthorn and North Melbourne and their game last week, and I think he would be unafraid to readily admit that he's not a Hawthorn fan at all.
No, not even slightly.
Okay, not even slightly. So
even though Di Domenico was one of my favourite players of all time, he played for Hawthorn. Mm-hmm. So it was sort of love-hate. I loved watching him play, but I hated that he was playing for Hawthorn. I would have been really happy if Dipper had been a Cats in the Cats.
Yeah.
We probably would have got to a grand final a lot quicker.
Well, it's nice when some of those players are able to turn their stripes 90 degrees. Like both Isaac Smith and Sean Higgins did this year. It's nice when they were able to take that 90-degrey turn and start wearing a better looking Guernsey.
Yes.
Yeah. So
for sure.
I think we've talked about this, in our discussions online, but and I've addressed this with a lot of other people. The AFL is at 18 clubs right now, and Tasmania is really clamoring for an actual AFL club and not simply Hawthorn and North Melbourne coming down and playing 2 or 3 games a season.
Yeah.
If Tasmania gets a 19th club, you would assume they would almost have to put a 20th club somewhere to try to balance it out, so you don't have bye weeks every single week of the season. So you don't have a bye week the last week. So where would you put the 20th club? In Darwin. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the only population centre in the Northern Territory that's big enough to support it, and it's a major game for Indigenous people.
Right.
And most of the Northern Territory are Indigenous people. They get it also. It allows players to come up from the central Australian area around Alice Springs, and it brings in the Tiwi Islands, which are always also part of the territory. I think they could build a really strong club there very quickly.
Do you worry about them playing in the Northern Territories during the time period of March through September because of the temperature?
I'd worry more about the amount of travelling that the Territorian players would have to do to compete.
That's a fair point.
It's just about as far as Western Australia.
Okay.
Not quite as far, but almost as far. So they'd have to do a lot of travelling. And of course, they're used to living in the tropics. They'll find it a big change to come down to any of the southern centres and play games. Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane. Mm-hmm. They're going to find that a lot cooler. I think it would, as you say, disadvantage the southern clubs when they go north. Because even in winter up there are days when it's 30 degrees.
Right. Yeah, I saw that. I saw that at the grounds where they played. I think Richmond and Essendon played the Dreamtime game up there last year. That they actually had on the bench. They actually had like a refrigerator room on the bench for the players to go in and cool off.
Yeah, the year before that, I think they played. They had ice jackets.
Okay.
They were like a life jacket that you'd wear in a boat. But they had pockets in it, and they could put ice in it to try and keep the players cool. Yeah.
Now, and I would almost think that you'd have to maybe make some kind of an accommodation for interchanges if you had a club up there. 75 might not be enough interchanges if you got to bring people off and get them cooled off and get them back out there again. I mean, that certainly would be testing people's endurance.
Yeah. But that's the game, isn't it? It's a game of endurance.
Good point. That's true. So
how many times even in modern this round do we see people sort of They get through. They get halfway through that fourth quarter, and they're out of gas.
Yeah.
It's a game of endurance.
So do you think that if a club ends up in Darwin, that maybe, and this is something that some other people have brought up and mentioned, that that maybe it ends up being a club that is, kind of a Darwin-based club, but then maybe they also play, similar to what Hawthorn and North Melbourne do, that maybe they go play a game or two each year at Alice Springs, and maybe a game over in Cairns, just to try to to build kind of a following in in the northern part of the country.
I think that'd be a good idea. I think particularly the Cairns idea would be really good. It's slightly more moderate for the southern teams. It's an in between.
Okay.
Cairns is about, well, on the map, Cairns would be near enough to halfway between Brisbane and Darwin.
Okay.
Except it's on the coast. It's fairly moderate. Cairns isn't all that. It gets hot in summer, but they have a pretty mild winter.
Okay. So,
but yeah, there's a lot of Indigenous people there in Cairns and Townsville, which is the big. It's more or less the capital of the north. There's a lot of Indigenous people up there who would follow an Indigenous team and would attend the games. The games would be very well attended, I think.
Well, and do you think that the club would be made up its an entirety of the entire list would be Indigenous players? Because I mean, I would think that some of the other stuff that we talked about before we started up tonight, I don't know if that would be a step back in terms of the progress, maybe the progress that's being made. If it was a club that was exclusively Indigenous players.
No, I don't think that it'd be exclusively Indigenous players.
Okay.
And it might even be a violation of some of the race laws here, but they would certainly need. Of course, racism can work both ways. I don't think they could manage the club on that basis.
Okay.
It would. They would have to have players on constant rotation. Some of them.
Right.
It's similar to we discussed the Gold Coast situation earlier.
Yeah.
Where there's a lot of transient people on the Gold Coast, and that's why they can never sort of field the same team from year to year. I think it'd be the same in Darwin. I think there's the population wouldn't be so transient, but they'd have a lot of white players rotating through. Okay, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, do you think that would it work? And again, I know Darwin is not the biggest city by far. It's a couple 100,000 people, if I remember correctly. Would it be worthy of if for the overall effectiveness of the game and maybe to level the playing field for all the clubs to consider putting up a stadium similar to Marvel up there? Where you have a dome.
It probably would be if they put a roofed stadium up there. They could also cool it.
Right.
So it wouldn't be such a temperature imposition on players coming from the south.
Now, so I'm thinking that in the next few years, that Tasmania has kind of put their foot down and said, we're pretty much demanding that you get us a club here, our own standalone club.
Yeah.
And we don't, and if I'm not mistaken, they have not negotiated to bring Hawthorn and North Melbourne back after this year. I think this was the last year of their contract, if I'm not mistaken, between
I didn't know that.
I think that because I think they've said that we don't want to renegotiate, and I could be wrong about this, but I seem to remember reading that they did not want to extend those clubs until they had a commitment from the AFL to place a club in Tasmania. So, and maybe if that happens, if they say, okay, 2026, they're going to put a club in Tasmania. Maybe then they extend those other 2 clubs for a few more years, or maybe
extend the other 2,
or maybe they tell one of them, you call heads or tails because you're the one that's going to Tasmania, and you flip a coin and see who's going to be the club that relocates there. Because from everything that I've seen, Hawthorn has a pretty strong membership base, but North has a difficult time with growing their membership base, and maybe, and again, and I'm not wishing this on anybody. If you're a North Melbourne supporter, trust me, I am not trying to yank your team out from underneath you and send them south. But if they were there, maybe that would help to grow the base of the club stronger in Tasmania. And then maybe you see an inverse then, where maybe North Melbourne comes back up and plays 2 or 3 home games in Melbourne. Maybe the Tasmania squad. Are you familiar with the TV show The Simpsons?
I've watched it a bit, yes.
Okay.
I haven't watched it recently.
Okay. Well, I haven't either, but I thought that, I know that they're really adamant about having a club called the Tasmanian Devils. But I think they could have had a club called the Hobart Simpsons, like for Bart Simpson.
Right.
And they could have right. I thought that would have been a good name for it, but that hasn't gone over very well with some people. And somebody shared a song with me that they'd written. Basically it's a song that's it's time for Tasmania it's a time for a club in Tasmania or something like that. It's on YouTube. It's kind of a catchy little tune. But I want to dig into some of the other things that we've talked about in the past. And the Anzac round was a few weeks ago, and you shared a story with me, and this is something that I know that the American listeners have no idea about, or very little idea about, especially this individual, this gentleman that you were talking about, and maybe even some of your own countrymen are not familiar with this gentleman, and what you do during Anzac Day. So can you tell us what it is that you, as an Australian citizen celebrating or remembering Anzac Day, what is it that you do? Because it's extraordinarily unique.
Every year for the last, I can't remember how many years now, I discovered a long time ago from a documentary on our national broadcaster, the ABC. I heard about Private Billy Singh. He was half Chinese, so he wasn't really eligible to be enlisted in our army because of our racist laws at the time. And Billy Singh enlisted in the Australian Army and was among the first to go to Gallipoli. And he took it into his own head to become a sniper. And during his 8 months in Gallipoli, he accounted for somewhere between, no one actually kept score, but it's somewhere between 150 and 200 Turkish soldiers that he shot. And I heard this on the ABC, and I decided to sort of do a bit more research into Billy Singh and his life. And he came from northern Queensland, a place called Claremont. He'd been a kangaroo shooter before he enlisted, and dabbled in gold mining, because it's a gold mining area up there as well. But mostly he was a kangaroo shooter.
Can I stop you there for really quick for a second?
Yeah. Yep.
A kangaroo shooter, are they doing that to harvest the animals for their meat, or are they doing that because they're considered nuisance animals at that point in time, or?
They can become a nuisance.
Okay.
It'd be the best way to put it. During good seasons, they breed extraordinarily well. If it's a drought, they won't breed at all.
Okay.
But when they breed up, they can be a nightmare for a farmer.
Okay.
They'll eat more. They'll eat more of his grass than his cattle or sheep will.
It's kind of like the feral.
They can become that.
It's like the feral hogs here.
Yeah, they're like Yeah, they're like a 6-foot rabbit.
I think I saw that movie. I think that's the movie Harvey, isn't it? So you said he was a kangaroo hunter, and I just was wanting to clarify that because I didn't know if they were hunting them, because I have had kangaroo before as well. I've had a kangaroo burger before, so
Okay.
I didn't know if this was
Right.
simply because they were harvesting the animals for that purpose or not.
No. It's not simply for the. That's the ultimate. That's where they end up.
Okay.
The culled animals end up as processed meat, but they're not specifically shot as a processed meat. The kangaroo shooters travel around, and they if there's an excess of kangaroos in one area, they'll go there. They won't wipe them out, but they'll thin them out, and the carcasses go to processing. But yeah, Billy Singh was a roo shooter, so he's a damn good shot. If you imagine trying to shoot something that's bouncing along.
Good point.
It's a bit hard. It's a bit hard to hit. But he went to Gallipoli. He was with the Queensland Light Horse. It's a cavalry regiment that didn't have any horses, and
they were very light horses.
They're very light horses.
In fact, you could carry your own horse into battle.
Yeah, actually, they did have horses, but all their horses were in Egypt. They trained in Egypt before they went to Gallipoli.
Okay.
And they left their horses behind because the terrain at Gallipoli is not cavalry territory.
Okay.
You run from the beach. I've been to Gallipoli, and there's the beach, and then there's a cliff face.
Okay.
So it's very steep terrain. They're not vertical cliffs, but they're extremely difficult to climb. And anyway, Billy Singh accounted for something between 150 and 200. The number varies depending on who you're talking to, but he accounted for a lot of Turkish soldiers. And the Turks became that tired of Billy Singh's marksmanship that they brought in their own sniper called Abdul the Terrible, and he was the best shot in the Turkish army, and he followed where Singh was hunting or doing his shooting, and worked out exactly where Singh had to have been shooting from, just from the angles of fire, and they had a duel virtually, and Singh managed to shoot Abdul through his eye.
Wow.
A fraction of a second before Abdul could get his shot away. And anyway, the upshot was that Billy went on from Gallipoli to the Western Front, where he continued his sniping against the Germans, and eventually returned to Australia. And because he was half Chinese, it was very hard for him to get a job. And he sort of got into a downward drift. He wasn't a drinker, but he fell into a sort of a downward spiral in his life. And he was found dead one morning in, I think it was 1940. He was found dead, and he lived in a boarding house in South Brisbane, and he was found dead in his bed. And the police came and investigated, and they found he had £6, it's about $12, and his war medals, and virtually nothing else. And £6 wasn't enough to bury him, and he was given a pauper's funeral. And he was laid to rest in an unmarked grave in the Toowong Cemetery in Western Brisbane. And some years later, it was just after the ABC had discovered him and had his documentary on television. People went looking for his grave, and they found out where he was, where he'd been laid to rest, and they had the body exhumed. And he was taken and buried with full military honours at the Anzac Cemetery at Lutwyche. And after I found this out, I actually went and looked for the boarding house where he'd used to live, because a plaque had been laid into the footpath outside the boarding house.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Unfortunately, that had been asphalted over. A tar footpath had gone through, and I don't know whether the plaque was removed or whether it was just asphalted over, but it was gone. So was the boarding house, actually. There was a commercial building on the site.
Yeah.
And I thought, there's got to be more to this. So I went out to the Lutwyche Cemetery and hunted around for his grave. And I was looking in the wrong place. His grave marker is a large white marble obelisk that you can actually see on Google Earth. It's visible from space.
Wow.
And there's black marble inlay with gold on the obelisk that explains who it is that's buried there and why, and explains that this is the grave of Billy Singh, and goes on to list his exploits and so forth. And I thought, I'm not going to go to the Anzac ceremonies anymore, because the grave was looking a little bit dilapidated. There is a committee that's supposed to look after it, and they don't do their job. And there's a flagpole there. So I thought, on Anzac Day, I'm going to go over to Billy Singh's grave, and I'm going to hoist an Australian flag above his grave. I'm going to spend the night there. So every Anzac Day now, I turn up at the Lutwyche Cemetery about 11 o'clock at night, and I spend the night there beside the grave. And then in the morning, just before dawn, I run the Australian flag halfway up the pole.
Wow.
And I stay there until about 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning. And then I hoist the flag to the top of the mast, and I leave the flag there. It's always gone next year.
So somebody takes it then? Wow. Or gets worn out?
I'd say that, yeah, it's probably worn out, or the cemetery keepers come and take it down. But I put a new flag up every year. So that's my Anzac Day now. So I go over there and I pay my respects to Billy Singh.
And that is so laudable. It is just, and you are a military veteran. I'm a military veteran. I have a child who's in the military right now. That's one of the things that I think that we could still, in many countries, we could still do a much better job of rendering, the respect that's due to some, to people who have served in the military. And in some cases, they don't necessarily want it. They don't want the recognition. The idea is that they were just doing their job. I seem to remember somebody saying that not that long ago, like maybe the last time I spoke to you about rescuing those people off of that house. You were just doing your job. Well, in my opinion, you went above and beyond, because I don't think the rest of your unit was out there doing what you were doing.
No, there was only two of us.
Yeah, exactly.
And the other guy couldn't swim.
But he could drive well.
He could.
Yeah.
He was the best winch driver in the unit.
He was accustomed to driving on the left side of the road, unlike myself, as we talked about earlier. In the few instances that I had a chance to do that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm looking at the picture of the obelisk and the flagpole, and it, if this gentleman is considered to be a national hero, and they have put a flagpole next to his grave, his memorial site there.
Yeah.
Why the hell isn't there a flag there all the time anyway?
I've got no idea, because it is actually the Anzac Cemetery.
Yeah.
You'd think that there'd be a flagpole there all the time for all of the men that are there. There's hundreds there. There's hundreds of men buried there.
Right. That doesn't make a bit of sense to me. But of course, again, this is something that the government's involved in, and I've been a government teacher now for 27 years, and I learn more and more every day that I don't always understand what the government does, because the government doesn't always know what they're doing, and whether that be here in the United States or in Australia. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah. I kind of take a cynical approach to things that the government does and say, okay, guys, they they're trying to get reelected. That's what's going on here. Okay, that's what's happening at this
That's
moment in
it.
time.
That's what it comes down
Yeah,
to.
yeah, they're trying to keep their job, and I tell my students, I said, guys, I said, I would vote for darn near every single one of you over just about everybody that we have in Congress right now. I said,
Right.
we might be better off, picking a phone book at random from every congressional district in the country, and just picking a name at random out of the phone book and saying, okay, you're the new representative there for that district, or for that, you're the new senator from that state. And
Yeah.
and maybe they would be somebody who would do a decent job for us. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't
I
know.
think it's political parties, Craig. I think that's the fault in the system. Is that it's dominated by the parties,
Yeah.
the left or the right, and it's
Yeah,
the same everywhere. It's the same in America. It's the same in England. It's the same in every democracy. You've got a left and a right, and minor parties get to fight over the bones in the middle, and sometimes get themselves an extra voice.
Right,
but
right.
It's basically those two monolithic parties, the left and the right, and I think that's the great failing of the system.
Yeah, I know. My students just recently watched. It was a series that was done about a dozen years ago on John Adams, who became the second president of the United States, who was one of the chief negotiators in getting the Declaration of Independence written, getting the Constitution written and passed, that type of thing. And they portray George Washington as somebody who is adamantly opposed to political parties. But it's
okay.
It is they are almost an inevitability. There that was a natural progression in any kind of a democratic state, where if you have people who have similar ideas, they're naturally going to congregate with one another and try to get more people that have similar ideas to be able to put those ideas into practice.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're in a way they're necessary evil. Maybe isn't the right term, but maybe an evil necessity.
Yeah.
Might be, if you just flip it around a little bit, maybe that's the way we should describe it. But you are somebody who is a history buff, I think I could safely say. Okay.
Yeah.
You're a big history fan. You seem to really be enthralled by or interested in the United States Civil War. And
that's right.
Yes. Where did that interest come about? Was it simply because, here's the United States, shipping all of their television products all over the world for people to watch, or how did that work?
Basically, that's about it.
Oh, well, it's been good talking to you. I'll talk to you later then.
No, it came about. Australia had the Olympics in 1956. We had no television before the Olympics. And a part of the deal with the Olympic Committee was we had to have television. So Australia made a big rush to get television out by 1956, but there was no local product. There were no Australian production companies. There were no movie houses here. Everything that we watched on television either came from England or America.
Okay.
And I remember there was only a few shows, like we had Hopalong Cassidy and Zorro and the half-hour cowboy and Indian shows.
Gunsmoke.
Cisco Kid.
Yes.
Gunsmoke.
Yeah.
The Rifleman.
I love the Rifleman.
They're all of those. But
in fact, real quickly, the actor that played the Rifleman's son just passed away about 2 weeks ago. Johnny Crawford.
Oh, really?
He just died. He was like 75 or 78. He just passed away a couple of weeks ago. Yep.
Oh, right. Anyway, there were very few of those shows that went for an hour. One that did. I used to go to the Cub Scouts, and when I came home from the Cub Scouts on Tuesday nights, there was one show on TV that I was allowed to watch because I was all sort of hyped up and excited after going to the Cubs, and it took me a little while to calm down before I could go to bed. So I used to watch a show called The Blue and the Grey.
Okay.
It was based around the American Civil War. I think there was only one season where it used that name, and it later changed its name to The Americans. And it went for maybe 3 seasons, and it dealt with the actual conflict of the Civil War. It wasn't like Gone with the Wind.
Right.
There was no romance.
Yeah.
There was no romance lines in it at all that I can remember. It dealt exclusively with the conflict of the Civil War.
Okay.
And that's where I came to hear words like, hear about things like Fort Sumter and Chancellorsville, all the Civil War battles.
Yeah.
It dealt with, in a historical way, with the lead up to the battles themselves and the aftermath. And that was where I developed my first interest in the Civil War.
Okay.
And when I went into the army, I met an American officer that was out here on exchange. The Vietnam War was still going for America, but I joined May of 1972, and we were already withdrawing. All Australian troops were out of Vietnam by October of 1972, but it went on for another 3 or so years for the Americans. And one of my first postings was at the Jungle Warfare Centre at Canungra, which has got a pretty dreadful reputation for breaking people. But we had an American officer that came there, and I happened to be driving for him one day. I was a driver, and I was driving him somewhere one day, and I just started talking about the Civil War and that particular television series. And the man must have been an enormous history buff himself.
Okay.
And not just on that occasion, but on several other occasions, he came and sought me out. He'd come to the barracks and say, "Oh, you want to go and have a drink, and we'll have a bit of a talk about the Civil War."
That's very cool.
And it was he must have come from a Civil War family himself. He was from Mississippi, and
pretty safe bet which
he
side
more or
they
less
were on.
introduced. And anyway, he was the one that put me in the mind, and I actually remember him saying this to me. He said, "You cannot understand modern America if you don't understand the Civil War." And that propelled me along the way to propelled me along the way to trying to deepen my knowledge of the Civil War, so that I could understand modern America. And that was where my interest in the Civil War came from. And it was quite a few years later I discovered that the leader of the Australian opposition at the time, Kim Beazley, was also a Civil War buff. He was such a Civil War buff he could name the general's horses.
Wow.
And he's a politician. But he was also one of our most popular politicians. He was, and he had actually worked as a missionary in India. I found out when I read his biography. I discovered that Kim Beazley had been a missionary. His father was also, I think he was the Minister for Education under Gough Whitlam. Okay. And Kim Beazley was like the next generation of Labor politician, and he was an enormously intelligent man, and he had this amazing interest in the Civil War. And I thought, well, I've got to deepen my knowledge a bit further here. So it just became almost a hobby to read not just not just about the battles and so forth, but getting further into it, into the politics of the situation. And I was just trying to deepen my knowledge of what is virtually our biggest ally.
And
Americans and Australians have been on the same battlefields virtually since World War One.
Yeah, and it's
we went to,
and let's hope we don't have to do it again.
I hope we don't.
Yes, let's hope we don't have to again.
We don't ever have to.
Yeah.
No.
But
I think that might be a vain hope. I think a militant China is going to upset the apple cart there. I'd hope that we never have to go into another battle.
Yeah, I unfortunately I worry about that. I worry about Russia. I worry about Iran. I guess I worry about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But
there's so many conflict points in the world at the moment that could just get out of control.
Yeah, yeah.
It would be Iran. It could become. That's a terrible flashpoint. I think it's one of the most dangerous flashpoints in the world.
Right.
But a belligerent China in the South China Sea, their actions in overtaking some of the coral atolls.
Right.
In the South China Sea, that are actually the property of the Philippines.
Well,
as you say, Russia.
Yeah. And the stuff going on in the Spratly,
Russia, in the Ukraine.
Yeah. The stuff going on in the Spratly Islands that you were talking about there. That has actually, from what I have been able to gather, it's kind of begun to push countries that maybe been slightly aligned with China, that are realizing, okay, you know what, like Vietnam has started to, the relationship between the United States and Vietnam has begun to change. The Philippines. I mean, there's talk about reopening the Subic Bay Naval Base, and I've heard rumblings that could very possibly become a joint American and Australian naval base.
Could well do.
Yeah, and there's been talk about
could very well do.
And I think you and I talked about this at another time, just in a discussion that that there's talk about actually reconstituting. I'm not sure which one it is, like the U.S. Navy's first fleet, and basically building a new port up in northern Queensland.
Yes, there, and there's talk of another one in on one of the islands off the coast of New Guinea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
China has a more forward.
Yeah, because
China, a more forward shield against Chinese incursion.
Yeah,
so, I don't know why, but the Australian government leased the port of Darwin to China.
It's all as we say here. It's all as we say here. It's all about the Benjamins.
Yeah.
Who's on the $100 bill in Australia?
I don't know. I'm not even sure that we do have $100 bill.
Okay.
But I don't think I've ever actually seen one.
Who's on the who's on the fifth? What's the biggest denomination you've seen?
$50.
So who's on that one?
And I can't actually tell you who's on it. I'm not that familiar with.
What? Wait a minute.
The only.
You're telling me all about you're telling me about the United States Civil War. You're telling me about things going on in Gallipoli 100 years ago, and you can't tell me about the money that's in your wallet right now.
They keep they keep changing the faces.
Oh, do they really?
I know that the $5, yeah, the $5 note has the Queen,
Okay.
but the rest of them change.
Okay, so it's
I
all
think
about.
Doug Nichols might have been on one.
So it's all about the Queens then, like we say about all about the Benjamins, like with Benjamin Franklin being on the $100 bill here. So it's all about the Queens. We'll go with the $5 bill then. That's pretty much what that's what my allowance is also. So I'm used to having about $5 with me when I go somewhere. So, it's yeah. The fact that you have this interest in in American conflicts like this is just fascinating, and it's something that I try to spark this in my kids and my students and get them interested in it, and it's it's a bit of an uphill battle, because but some kids really do get interested in these things, and kids are kids. They're going to be the products of their technology. Whether it be when we were younger, when we really didn't have a whole lot. I joke with my students that that when people my age were kids, when the sun would come up, you'd have breakfast and your parents would take you to the door and kick you in the seat of your pants and say, don't come back until lunch. And and then you came back for lunch and they turn around and they kick you in the seat of the pants and say, don't come back till dark. And you just were off doing your thing. And nowadays, kids are, they're tracked by their phone. The parents know where they are at all times. Call me every 15 minutes.
They're picked up from school.
Yeah,
I used to walk 2 miles.
Well,
I used to walk 2 miles to my primary school when I was 7. Well, I walked 2 miles to school and 2 miles home again.
But see what we did here. We used to do here 2 miles each way uphill in the snow. Both ways it was uphill.
Oh, that's right. You get snow.
Yeah. Well, I'm kidding. We used to joke about that, saying, we had to walk, we had to walk 2 miles in the snow uphill both ways every day to school when it wasn't necessarily that bad. But that's what we'd always tell the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we're coming out of COVID here, and I had a few, just kind of questions to help the people who are listening learn a little bit about you, because you're a fascinating. You may look in the mirror in the morning when you're brushing your teeth and think that you're pretty boring, and maybe other people, maybe your kids think you're boring, but you're a pretty fascinating guy with all of your varied interests. Okay, and that's so I wanted to dig into that a little bit and maybe help the listeners learn a little bit about you. Okay, beyond what the Civil War and Anzac Day and that sort of thing. So, if COVID is willing, what's on your bucket list for this year? What do you want to get done this year?
I want to go to the Philippines.
I want
to go and have a look at Manila.
Okay.
I don't think a lot of people realize what a fight that Manila was during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
It was as bad as Stalingrad. The place was almost completely leveled during World War II. So I want to go to Manila and just have a look at the place now.
Okay.
Compared to
photos that you've seen,
what it must have been during.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that, and the other place I want to visit is Cuba.
Yeah, I know you've told me that you said you sent a package to somebody in Cuba that ended up going to France.
Yeah. It was a CD. I've fallen in with a bunch of music nuts in Cuba, and one of the big bands in Cuba during the 1960s, even during the Castro era, was the Beatles.
Okay.
They were an immensely big band, and they used to have to listen to it in secret. And they couldn't be openly.
Yeah, and
they couldn't be openly seen to be.
Yeah. That's before quality headphones.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah,
Yes.
they were just little transistor radios.
Mm-hmm.
But I got into a Beatles history group
Okay.
and accidentally ran across a Cuban in there, and I mentioned there that I had been to the Beatles concert in Sydney in 1964. I was 10 years old. That uncle I was telling you about before that introduced me to sort of indigenous culture.
Uh-huh.
He also took me to see. He took me to see the Beatles,
Wow.
and I mentioned in this Beatles history group on Facebook that I'd been to the concert, and a message popped up the next day from a chappie in Cuba, and he said, can you tell me more about the concert? And I ended up writing him quite a long, considering the Beatles were only on for 25 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote him a fairly long description of going to the concert. We went to the hotel where the Beatles were staying, and they came out on the balcony. And anyway, I told him the whole story of the Beatles concert. And he sent me back the name of a guitarist. His name's just escaped me for the moment. He only made, he was a Jamaican, and he did most of his work in Cuba. And he was so unique that he is mentioned in the Fender Museum, the Fender Guitars Museum. Conrado, it'll come back to me.
Okay.
Anyway, he mentioned this chappie, Conrado Wilson. Conrado Wilson was his name, and the chappie in Cuba mentioned this guy, and he said, "Can you find out for me anything?" Apparently, they have some limitations on the internet in Cuba, and he said, "Can you find me out anything about this?" He had Cuban nationality. He was born in Jamaica, and he had Cuban nationality, and no one knows what happened to him. He made one recording.
Mm-hmm.
He recorded one album of tunes, and I eventually did track down an LP secondhand on Amazon, and it was $500.
His combo and magic guitar. Was it
That's
called?
him.
Yep. I'm
Yep.
looking at the picture on the other screen right now.
With his big googly eyes.
Uh-huh.
He's yeah. Anyway, I did track down a CD of all places. It was in Japan, and I found the CD, and I bought a copy of it, and I sent it to this guy in Cuba. He gave me his address, and I sent it to him. And that CD just disappeared off the face of the earth. I had no idea where it went. So I bought another one, and I posted it, and I went to Cuba, and then for some reason or other, it left Cuba, and it went to France, and it went to 11, I think it was, different destinations in France before arriving back in Paris. And then it went because it went by ship. In the middle of COVID, I couldn't get it onto airmail because there were no flights.
Right.
So it had gone, although I'd paid for airmail, it went by ship. So it's gone on this Contiki tour around France, and then it went to Spain. And then it went to the Canary Islands, and then it eventually showed up in Cuba 9 months after it was posted.
So he did get it.
He did get it in the end, yes.
Okay.
He had to do a bit of chasing around because it got held up in customs for some reason. There's all sorts of things you can't send to Cuba, and I imagine data CDs that contain data are one of them. You can't post a data CD to Cuba.
That makes sense.
There was probably some Cuban public servant who had to actually sit down and listen to it, make sure there was no data on it. It was all just music. But yeah, it took 9 months for it to get there.
Oh, well. Now,
anyway, I've become something of a fan of Cuban music.
Okay.
And I just want to go there for the music. They just don't seem to stop. Their music just doesn't stop. It's everywhere. It's in the streets. It's in the cafes. It's just Cubans move to a rhythm.
Yes, they do. Yes,
as I've been told.
So I think
So over the Philippines, go to Manila, and then
Okay.
Cuba, and that'll be my.
Okay, that's
my
your
two
bucket
places
list
to
this
go.
year. Okay, sounds like a good trip.
Yeah.
So I think I know the answer to this question already, but I'm going to ask it. Who was the most influential person in your life?
My uncle.
That's what
the one that took me out.
That's what I was thinking. That was going to be the answer there. Okay.
Used to take me bushwalking and looking at indigenous cave paintings and looking for petroglyphs and Australian wildflowers and wildlife and drummed it into my head that the indigenous people need to be treated better. Of course, they are these days, but not only treated better, but their culture needs to be preserved. It's the oldest culture in the world. It goes back in France. Remember a place called Lascaux?
Mm-hmm.
Two kids fell through a hole chasing a rabbit, and they ended up in this enormous cave. And when they got some light in there, they found all these cave paintings of bison and different animals that were around in Europe. And it's been Lascaux Caves. They're now protected. And those cave paintings go back 40,000 years. There are 12 other sites of similar cave paintings in Europe. Mm-hmm. We've got thousands of them.
Wow.
Thousands.
And I'm assuming those are documented.
Nation, the ones that we've found so far, mm-hmm. They're still finding them. Mm. There are still caves. People go to and find caves, and there's petroglyphs everywhere. And this is an artistic culture that's probably at least 60,000 years old. So it was old when those caves were painted in Lascaux, and it was that uncle that told me all these things, that took me and showed me these things. He would be the most influential person in my life, without doubt.
Okay, it's and that made sense to me, and I having talked with you earlier about this, that I thought that was going to be your answer on that, and the people listening hadn't heard that at this point, so I'm glad you filled in some of that gap there, because I was kind of hanging myself out there saying, "Oh, I know the answer," but nobody else knew the foundation for that there. So, yeah, if you're going to have a dinner party. And I like asking these questions because it gets you thinking a little bit here. You're going to have a dinner party, and you're inviting 5 people from history. Who's coming to your party? I think I know at least
my great aunt.
Okay.
Well, my uncle would be there.
Okay.
My great aunt. Lady Violet Gibson. She shot the end off Mussolini's nose.
No shit.
She tried to assassinate Mussolini in May of 1926. She hid out. He was opening a library in Rome, and she concealed herself behind one of the columns at the front of the library. And when he came out of the library, she pulled a pistol out of her handbag, took aim at his head from 4 feet away, and managed to shoot the end off his nose.
This is the first time here. Wow. This is the first I've heard of this. This is I'm gonna find some info on it. So may I ask what happened to her?
The security guard grabbed her, and she was taken away, and Mussolini himself later came to see her. And there are photos of Mussolini with the plaster over the end of his nose. You can look those up online. and there's a photo that exists of Mussolini coming out of the library and her with a hand in a handbag, just about to pull the gun out and shoot him. But she wore really thick glasses. Coke bottle glass. We call them Coke bottle glasses here. So the bottom of a Coca-Cola bottle. And they had been bumped off in the crowd. Mussolini was enormously popular, so there was a big crowd around. And in the fight to get closer to him, her glasses had been bumped off, and that was why she only managed to shoot him through the nose.
Wow.
And not somewhere,
wow,
not somewhere more fatal.
So did she? I mean, was she imprisoned? Was she executed? What happened?
No, she was. Her title was Lady Violet Gibson. Her father was Lord Althorpe, and he was I've got to get this right. He was the keeper of the seal, it's called. It's a hereditary position in Ireland. He was like the Governor General of Ireland.
Okay.
And it's a hereditary position. And it would have passed on to my aunt's brothers. But Mussolini found out that she was an English noblewoman, and she was held in, it wasn't a prison, I think it was a convent. She was held in a convent on the condition that she didn't try and run away, and she didn't. And then she was shipped back to England. This was 1926. She was shipped back to England, and she was put in a mental asylum for the rest of her life.
Wow. That, had her glasses not come off, history changes.
History changes. There may have been no Third Reich, because Hitler was
propped up.
He admired.
Yeah.
Yeah, he admired Mussolini. Mussolini was his model for the Third Reich.
Holy mackerel! I had no idea this was going to be taking this turn. Wow. I'm. It's not often that I'm speechless, and I'm speechless right now. And you know what? That's a really bad thing to happen when you're running a podcast. It's sitting here speechless. It's So okay, now all I'm going to say, you've only named 2 people coming to your party. You've still got 3 more. I'm assuming Mussolini's going to come because he's got some good pasta recipes.
No, I don't think I'd have Mussolini there. You've hit me with it. This isn't the easiest of questions to answer. Abe Lincoln.
Okay.
Definitely. I'd have Abe there.
I was thinking Robert E. Lee might be one you would bring along too. Yeah,
well,
based upon your previous conversation.
I'd make him and Abe share a seat.
Okay. That's fair enough.
I wouldn't want. Yeah, I think they were both enormous men.
Yes, yeah.
And for completely different reasons. Look, I've got to tell you, I don't know how Jefferson Davis didn't get hung for treason.
Well, I have a recommendation for a podcast for you when we're all done here, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes, because I've actually mentioned it on I think on other episodes, but I've linked to it as well. It's one called 1865. And it basically it picks up after the assassination of Lincoln, and it's kind of it's a drama, and it's the clash between Andrew Johnson and Edwin Stanton, the Secretary of War, and what transpired. I think you would absolutely love it. It's fascinating.
All right.
So I'm going to send you a link to that, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes, because the gentlemen that do this podcast do a phenomenal job with this. So I'll send you a link to that here when we're all done tonight, because I think you'll like that. Well, Well, you've got
Plato.
okay. That's a good one. So we've got our five then. We've got our
Yeah,
five.
I'd have to have Plato there.
Okay.
Plato put forward the concept of utopia, and he was one of the greatest intellectual thieves of all time, because at the time that Plato was putting forward his vision of utopia, exactly that system that he proposed, with the three levels of, like, the ruling class, the public servant class, and everybody else, that had already been in a part of Indian government in India. It had been a part of their government system for 2,000 years before Plato came along.
Wow.
The caste system,
Yeah,
in India, is exactly what Plato proposed. So he's an intellectual thief, and I'd love to get hold of him and challenge him on it, because I think all he did was superimpose the Indian caste system into an ancient Greek political argument. He didn't think it up. I'm absolutely certain of that. I've read the Bhagavad Gita, which is the English, the Indian holy book, and the proposal in there for the caste system, and as passed down to them by the gods. And I can't find any difference between what was written in the Bhagavad Gita and what Plato proposed. I've read Plato, and the further I got into it, I thought, hang on, this is almost exactly what I read in the Bhagavad Gita.
Well,
15 or 20 years before.
To be fair, he wasn't looking it up on Google. So
no, no, that's true.
Yeah.
But I think he had pre-knowledge. I don't think it was his idea.
Right.
At all.
So
that gives me 5.
Yep, it does. So go ahead.
There's others that I could put in there. Mao Zedong. I think he'd be a fascinating character to have dinner with. And an Australian outlaw called Ned Kelly.
I have heard the name. I've heard the name. Right. I don't know a lot about him, but
he was a bushranger, which is a bad guy. Bank robber. He was a bank robber. He was a murderer. He killed the policeman in a shootout at Stringybark Creek. And but he was also more. It's been put forward that he was actually he was Irish, of course, with the name Kelly, and it's been put forward that he was a rebel, and that he was trying to incite a rebellion, and that robbing the banks was a part of the way to fund that rebellion. He in his final gunfight, he was actually shot by an American, a Pinkerton man. Kelly wore armour that was made from ploughshares, and the Pinkerton man, Kelly had been in a gunfight for hours with the police, and the armour that he wore is on display in a museum in Victoria, I think, and it's full of holes or dents, but the bullets weren't penetrating. And both he and his gang, there were 4 of them, had a gunfight at, oh God, I can never remember the name of the place. It was in central Victoria, and they had a big gunfight there with 200 police, and the 4 of them were all killed, no, Kelly himself wasn't killed, but he was shot in the knees by a Pinkerton man because Kelly's armour didn't come down far enough to protect his lower legs.
Well, you got to get him. You got to get him where you can get him. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was shot in the knees by the Pinkerton man, shot with a shotgun. And they arrested him and put him on trial, and he was eventually hanged. But it more or less put a stop to Kelly's rebellion. So yeah, I'd have Ned there just to find out exactly what went on.
Okay.
And
I've got a few more that I wanted to toss out at you here before we wrap this up right now, and we let you get going on your Thursday here, since you've been up for most of the evening now, and into the morning. It's kind of like I am on the weekends watching footy, where I don't sleep much on the weekends at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I always know if I send you a message when the footy's on, there'll be a reply.
I'm probably it's very unless it's the, let's see, if it's the night games on like Saturday night, I might not be awake because they start at like 4 o'clock in the morning. I may have gone to bed by then. So do you have a prized possession that you have hung on to since you were a little kid? Have you got something that you got tucked away in a drawer that you've hung on to that you're going to pass along to somebody down the road, and you've got a large number of people to consider who you're going to pass it along to with the number of grandkids that you said you had?
Yeah, 22.
Wow.
It's 22 of them. I've got a bandsaw blade.
Huh. Okay.
And it's in itself, it has a history, but it's a family history, but it's also part of Australian history. The Murray River that divides Victoria from New South Wales was not descended from its head to the sea until 1933, I think it was. And it was descended by a small expedition of, there was only 4 men, and they had 2 kayaks. Well, they called them kayaks, but they were really just a large double-ended boat that were propelled by paddles rather than oars.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them sank within the first couple of days. They ran it onto some rocks and it sank. But the other kayak proceeded all the way down the Murray River and eventually out into the sea. The Murray River ends in an enormous lake called Lake Alexandrina, and there's an opening to the sea there. Anyway, the kayak made it to the ocean, and that kayak was built by my grandfather. And the only part of it, he was a shipwright, and the only part of that expedition that remains is the bandsaw blade that my grandfather used to cut the planks to build.
Wow.
No, it was to cut. It was to cut the planks.
Okay.
To make the wood came to him already milled.
Okay.
But the planks had to be steamed and shaped. And an enormous. He built beautiful boats.
Yeah.
I can't describe the beauty of the boats that he built. But the only thing that remains of that expedition is that bandsaw blade, because my grandfather hung it in his workshop, and he gave it to me when I was about 9 years old and told me the story of the kayak. And there's pictures of the kayak in the Border Morning Mail, which is the newspaper for Albury, the town of Albury, which straddles the border.
Okay.
Albury-Wodonga straddles the border across the Murray River. And they took photos of that kayak as it was leaving on the on the journey, and that's the only thing that remains now is that old newspaper article and the kayak and the bandsaw blade.
So do you think that blade should, and I'm not saying that this is what you're going to do, but is it something that a museum would want to display?
Quite probably, and I think that's what I'll do with it when it's when I go. The bandsaw itself is in a museum, along with
so the saw is already in the museum. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, the saw's in the museum. Yeah, and I've only got the blade.
Okay.
But I think I'd like to reunite it, because I don't think that bandsaw has a blade in it.
That's it's because you took it. Your grandfather took it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it hung in his workshop for years.
Right. Yeah, I've got kind of the one thing that I have at my house is I have a map that was drawn in 1830 of before they became states, of the states of the territories of Michigan and Wisconsin before they became states, and it has very detailed maps of Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio on it. So it's an almost 200-year-old map that I've got hanging up in my front room. It's a beautiful map. It's one that it has so much detail on it where there were different trading posts and where different numbers of buffalo herds have been spotted and that type of thing on it. It's one of my professors in college said that it's the kind of map you could do, like you could do your research on a graduate degree with this map, and which I was not doing my graduate work in that field, but it's kind of a cool map.
That's amazing.
Yeah, my grandparents found it in the attic of their house in Michigan, and it's been in since they found it. It was in their house. It got passed down to my dad, and then it got passed down to me. Then, so that's kind of cool.
You might you might pass that along to Dalton.
Probably. I would imagine that one of my two kids are going to get it. Yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, a big thanks to Orville Gibson, who I was actually trading messages with on the computer this morning as I was getting ready to record this intro and outro of this episode, talking about the games from this round and how we did on our tips. I think I did a little better on my tips than he did. Of course, we both got the Geelong and Richmond games incorrect in our tips this weekend. If you have an idea for a show topic, or if you know somebody that you think would be a great guest for the podcast, feel free to leave me a voicemail on the website. Shoot me a DM on Twitter at Yank_on, or send me an instant message on Facebook, or send me an email at yankonthefooty@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Remember, you can find out again everything about the podcast at yankonthefooty.com. I hope that you'll consider leaving me a review, either on my website or on Apple Podcasts. It allows me to see what I'm doing well, what I could do better. It allows me then to share those reviews out on my social media to tell other people who might be prospective listeners that, hey, you might want to go ahead and check out this show. So hopefully you'll consider taking a couple minutes and leaving me a review. Let me know what you think. Remember, again, you can reach me at yankonthefooty@gmail.com, on Twitter at Yank_on, Instagram and Facebook at @YankOnTheFooty. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for listening. We are already closing in on the last, basically, third of the season. And there are still battles to be had in terms of who's going to be where on the ladder. We saw some significant changes this weekend. We saw some shifts that shifted back rather quickly as well. We'll get into those in the live episode coming up here in a couple of days. But I want to thank you for listening again. And, we're all fans of this game that we love. And I hope you'll consider sharing the podcast with your friends and family. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, may your dribble kick never hit the post. I'll catch you later. This has been episode number 96 of A Yank on the Footy. Again, don't forget that you can reach me at yank_on Twitter or to yankonthefooty@gmail.com. And you can also reach me at my website at yankonthefooty.com. Love to hear from you, and I hope you'll share the podcast with your friends and family. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, this is Craig Wessels. Goodbye.